This might be the strangest chicken soup you'll ever see. Because yes, at one point I decided it would be a good idea to drop eggs into it using a syringe. I don't know what I was thinking, but it actually kind of worked. Stick around, this is not your grandma's chicken soup. Or maybe it is, I wouldn't know. Hey, welcome back. Today we are making a carnivore chicken soup. It's simple, it's cozy, and it gets just a little bit ridiculous. Which is pretty much how things go around here. I mean, only on this channel would I decide it's a good idea to buy a syringe just to mess around with eggs in a soup. But that's what makes this fun. Carnivore eating doesn't have to be boring. It can be playful, messy, even a little experimental. And you'll still end up with something hearty at the end. And because we just hit 10,000 subscribers, which honestly blows my mind, I wanted this video to be more than just another recipe. Think of it as me cooking for you in my kitchen, showing you not just what works, but also the silly mistakes along the way. So grab a seat and let's dive into this one together. I started off with about 225 grams of chicken cubes. Every time I measure it out I think, that's not going to be enough. And that's exactly when I reach for the bacon. I grabbed a few slices, then of course added one more on top of that. Because somehow I always convince myself the first few slices weren't enough. But hey, more bacon, no complaints. Then I set aside 3 eggs, and these eggs are where things get interesting later on. I had this little vision for them, a weird twist on egg drop soup, but I didn't really trust myself, so I went a bit over the top trying to prepare for it. You'll see. For the base, I had about 100 milliliters of water and 300 milliliters of bone broth. If I was really doing things by the book, this would be chicken broth, but I didn't have any, so beef bone broth it is. Honestly, it works just fine. It's rich, flavorful, and it was sitting in my freezer already. That's what I love about carnivore cooking. It doesn't have to be perfect, you just use what's on hand. And to round things out, I had some cream cheese and butter waiting on the side. They are completely optional, but I like having them as a backup for extra richness. But before we get to the broth, I had this idea for the eggs that, well, let's just say it didn't exactly go to plan. The first thing I did was grab the bacon and chop it up into little pieces. Nothing fancy, just small enough so they'll crisp up nicely later and be easy to sprinkle over the soup at the end. Once that was done, I set it aside and turned to the eggs. Now here's where things started to get a little silly. I had this vision of doing some kind of modified egg drop. Not the traditional way, but my own twist. The problem is, I don't exactly trust myself with eggs. To be more specific, I didn't trust myself not to break the yolks when I didn't want to. So instead of cracking all 3 into one bowl like a normal person, I decided to crack each egg into its own separate tray. That way, if I messed one up, I wouldn't ruin the whole batch. Logical in theory, in practice, it got weird. I set both a pan and a small pot on the stove to heat up. Into the pot I poured about 100 milliliters of water to get things started. While that was warming, I dropped the chopped bacon into the pan and gave it a good stir. Right away you get that sizzle, and the smell starts creeping through the kitchen. I just kept moving it around, letting the fat render out, and the edges slowly crisp. By then, the water in the pot was hot enough, so I pulled 2 frozen blocks of my bone broth out of the freezer and dropped them straight in. If you have ever frozen broth, you know what I mean. They look like big ice cubes just clunking around in there while they melt down. So now I had bacon on one side, broth starting to come together on the other, and I wasn't rushing either of them. Just letting the bacon reach that perfect crunch and the broth slowly build its base. Now if I had followed my grandma's way of making chicken soup, I would have just dropped the chicken straight into the boiling broth, let it cook the old-fashioned way, and called it a day. That's exactly how she did it when I was a kid. But when I tried that method in the meatball soup video, a few of you weren't too happy with it. So this time I decided to switch things up and cook the chicken first in the bacon fat. Way more flavor, way less plain boiled chicken. While the broth was slowly heating in the pot, no rushing that part, I tossed the chicken cubes straight into the pan with the bacon fat. I gave it about 5 minutes to cook, stirring occasionally, just letting it take on that color and soak up the fat. You might notice that I didn't add any spices. I rarely use them at all, and for me there's already enough salt coming in from the bacon and later on the cream cheese. But if you're skipping dairy, this is the point where you might want to season it to taste. In the last minute, I added just over a tablespoon of butter. This is something I always do. It gives the chicken a richer flavor and keeps it juicy. To check if it was done, I just pressed down with my spatula and split one of the pieces open. And once it was ready, I carefully transferred the chicken into the broth. I always try to avoid splashing everywhere, but let's be honest, it usually happens anyway. I turned the heat down a little because the bubbles in the pot were starting to go wild. And now it was time for the moment you've probably been waiting for. What on earth was I going to do with those eggs? Well, yeah, as I said before, I was aiming for kind of an egg drop situation, but with my own twist. I had this vision in my head of doing it better somehow. Don't ask me why, I really don't know. It just seemed like a good idea at the time. Earlier that day, I even went to a couple of different stores hunting down a syringe. Because in my head, squirting the eggs into the broth like some kind of a doctor would somehow make this all more controlled and more fun. And honestly, it did look pretty cool, even if it made 0 sense. I felt like I had more control over the egg dropping, but mostly it just made me laugh at myself. Now, before doing the eggs, I was supposed to add in the optional cream cheese. That was the plan, but I was so distracted by this whole syringe thing that I completely forgot. So just imagine I did this step properly before starting this madness. Thanks in advance. And then I remembered, we had just hit 10,000 subscribers, which is insane. I wanted to do something to mark it, so I decided to use one of the yolks to draw a yellow heart in the soup for you guys. It disappeared almost immediately, but hey, I hope you all stick around longer than that heart did. And if you are new here and thinking, what is this guy even doing? Well, welcome to Meet Carnivore. This is how things work around here. My whole goal is to show you that eating this way doesn't have to be boring. You can be silly, you can experiment, and it will still taste good. I let the soup rest for just a minute, then grabbed the ladle and poured it into a bowl. The broth was rich, the chicken was tender, and those little streaks of egg actually looked pretty good floating through it. To finish it off, I took the crispy bacon pieces I had set aside earlier and sprinkled them right on top. That's the best part. They stay crunchy even against the hot broth. And yeah, sorry, no eating shot this time. I know I've done that in the last couple of videos, but it's also a good time to find out if you actually want me to keep including those. Let me know in the comments. Either way, this soup turned out way better than my whole egg syringe experiment probably deserved. Alright, that's all for today. Thanks for hanging out with me while I cook this up. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment and smash that like button. And I'll see you here next time on Meet Carnivore.